This is a production of Cornell University.
I first met David Ferry a long time ago when I was a graduate student. And he and a couple of other people were responsible for my not bailing out of graduate school, partly because of their conversation, partly because they were doing such interesting work. So it seemed like graduate school actually came to something sometimes. I realize that that's hard for some people to believe, but it does, probably more easily here than it was back then there. What David Ferry was doing then was working on Wordsworth's poetry, and what he produced, it was a dissertation that became a book, was one of the finest books about Wordsworth that exists. And I knew him first as a critic, and a very subtle and interesting and original one. He was also writing poems, which he'd begun writing when he was a soldier in the Second World War. And I saw those as they came along. I'm not going to read any. He's a better reader than I am. But I can say this about both his poems and his translations. The lines tend to be very quiet, and they tend to have an enormous tensile strength. And you'll see that for yourselves. It's a pleasure to welcome him here.
Thanks, Neil. Reading is always a narcissistic experience of the poet shamelessly peering into the pool of his own writing and liking it. I have a poem called Narcissus in 3 stanzas. There's the one about the man who went into a telephone booth on the street, called himself up, and nobody answered because he wasn't there. So how could he possibly have answered the phone? The night went on and on and on and on. The telephone rang, and nobody answered. And there's the one about the man who went into the telephone booth and called himself up, and right away answered. And so they had a good long heart-to-heart far into the night. The sides of the phone booth glittered and shone in the light of the streetlight light as the night went echoing on. Out in the wild hills of suburban New Jersey, up there above South Orange and Maplewood, the surface of a lonely pond, iced over, under the avid breath of the winter wind, and the snow drifted across it and settled down, so at last you couldn't tell that there was a pond. I'm going to read a mixture of poems and translations, and I'm planning not to say a lot in between them, hoping that most of it is self-evident. I'd like to begin with a sestina. My wife and I worked for years at a supper for street people at a church in Boston, and a number of my poems have come out of that experience over the years. A sestina, as you know, is a 6-line stanzas, 6 of them, unrhymed, but with the same end words for each line, same pattern of end words repeated in a different sequence from stanza to stanza, and then an envoy of 3 lines at the end, in which each of those end words appear in pairs in those lines. These end words in my poem also appear internally a number of times. So there's quite a racket. The end words are, as they occur in the first stanza, are body, voice, unclean, torment, event, and enchantment. The guest Ellen at the supper for street people. The unclean spirits cry out in the body or mind of the guest Ellen in a loud voice, torment me not, and in the fury of her unclean hands beating the air in some kind of unending torment. Nobody witnessing could possibly know the event that cast upon her the spell of this enchantment. Almost all the guests are under some kind of enchantment, of being poor day after day in the same body, of being witness still to some obscene event, of listening all the time to somebody's voice whispering in the ear things divine or unclean in the quotidian of unending torment. One has to keep thinking there was some source of torment, something that happened someplace else, unclean. One has to keep talking in a reasonable voice about things done, say, by a father's body to or upon the body of Ellen, in enchantment helpless, still by the unforgotten event, enchanted, still in the old forgotten event, a prisoner of love, filthy Ellen in her torment, guest Ellen in the dining hall in her body, hands beating the air in her enchantment, sitting alone, gabbling in her garbled voice the narrative of the spirits of the unclean. She is wholly the possessed one of the unclean. Maybe the spirits came from the river. The enchantment entered her maybe in the northeast kingdom. The torment, a thing of the waters, gratuitous event, came up out of the waters and entered her body and lived in her in torment and cried out in her voice. It speaks itself over and over again in her voice, cursing, maybe or not, a familiar, obscene event, or only the pure event of original enchantment from the birth of the river waters, the pure unclean, rising from the source of things in a figure of torment, seeking out Ellen, finding its home in her poor body. Her body, witness is, so also is her voice of torment coming from unknown event. Unclean is the nature and name of the enchantment. And this is a poem called The Procelite. A man the unclean spirits had got into the parish hall on Tuesday night. The unclean spirits poured out through his skin in the form of filth and cried out in that form and cried out in the form of how he went rapidly back and forth as if on many errands to one person and another, or to nobody, up and down the parish hall. Little trips back and forward rapidly, like a wasp or fly, hysterical with purpose, battering himself against our difference. There was authority in him as he went, carrying a message to one of us and another, who had condemned him to this filth and to this unavailing rage, and the little voice crying out something in the body's cage. The voice was pitifully small, as if from someplace else, or time of childhood, say, or country other, telling us something no one in the parish hall could possibly understand, rabbinical, as if of ancient learning, knowledgeable and unintelligible, a proselyte. The morphemes were uncouth. His body was clad in the black of the unclean spirits. And then he was gone away from the dining room. A wasp trapped in a house, desperately trying, flying from one room into another room, how to get out of the place in which it was, or else to carry the message to someplace other. He went to the phone on the wall of the hall outside and said into the phone whatever it was he was saying, and tore the phone out of the wall and talked to the wall, telling it things in the tiny, far-off, doleful, insect crying voice in that other language. And then he went to the outside door and said to the outside door of the parish hall, whatever it was, he said to us and the phone and the wall. And then he was gone away into the night. And this is an ode by Horace, the 28th ode of the first book. It's in two parts. I've called it A Beach Near Tarentum. The rubric of the first part reads, "A traveler ashore on a beach near Tarentum happens upon the grave of the Pythagorean philosopher Archytas. What good does it do you, Archytas, confined as you are to this little heap of earth on this lonely strand beside the sea? Archytas, you measured the earth and counted all the uncountable grains of sand there are on the beach. What good does it do you now? What good does it do that once upon a time you went out exploring the houses of gods in the sky, adventuring in your mind round heaven's rotunda? What good does it do now death has taken your measure? The father of Pelops fell, though he was once convivial at the banquet of the gods, and Tithonus fell, whom heaven had taken up. Minos, too, whom Jupiter had conferred with, and Pythagoras, having chosen the very shield that belonged to Euphorbus, the long-dead Trojan hero, from 100 other shields of long-dead heroes, thought he, Pythagoras, must have been he, Euphorbus, back in a former life. And so he died a second time, and therefore he was sent a second time to Orcus down below, this time for good. Pythagoreans who think Pythagoras by far the best witness there ever was to truth and nature, he must have defeated death at least that once. But no, be sure of this, the dark is final, once and for all, body and soul, for all, and all must go there by the path of death. Some are presented by the Furies as a spectacle for the pleasure of savage Mars. The hungry sea devours the drowning sailor. Old and young jostle together on their way down. No one is spared by cruel Proserpina. The rubric of the second part. The voice of the unburied corpse of a sailor nearby on the beach speaks to the traveler. I too have perished. I too was one who drowned. Notice, bad wind confederate of Orion, brought on the storm that overwhelmed my boat, and so it was, I died. O traveler, O passerby, do not refuse a few handfuls of sand to cover up my corpse exposed, unburied here on the lonely beach. 3 handfuls given, then no matter how the surface raised up by the great storm wind, may you be safe, and may the harmless storm exhaust its rage upon the Venusian woods far inland. May good fortune come to you from Jupiter and from Neptune, god of Tarentum. If you refuse, have you thought about the curse? It may be you who needs these rites someday, and they may be disdained. O passerby, I will not unavenged unburied lie. No penitential offering later on will help you then. Therefore, pause but a moment to give 3 handfuls of sand and go on your way. I'm going to call the book that I'm just completing, I think I'm going to call it In the Reading Room. And this is a short poem called In the Reading Room. Alone in the library room, even when others are there in the room, alone, except for themselves, there is the illusion of peace. The air in the room is stilled. There are reading lights on the tables, looking as if they're reading, looking as if they're studying the text and understanding, shedding light on what the words are saying. But under their steady, imbecile gaze, the page is blank, patiently waiting not to be blank. The page is blank until the mind that reads crosses the black river, seeking the queen of the underworld, Persephone, where she sits by the side of the one who brought her there from Enna, Hades, the mute, the deaf, king of the dead letter. She is clothed in the beautiful garment of our 1,000 misunderstandings of the sacred text. And this is a poem called Measure 100. Sorry. Measure 100. There is a passage in the Mozart K 511 Rondo in A minor, measures 99 through 101, and focused on measure 100, where there are at least 4 different melodies, or fragments of melodies, together and apart, resolving themselves or unresolving themselves with enigmatic sweetness or melancholy, distant memories of victories, personal, royal, or mythic over demons, sophisticated talking about ideas, moments of social or sexual concord, or of parting, though with mutual regret, differences and likenesses of natures, allusions to disappointments, as also to an unexpected gift somebody gave to someone there in the room behind the music, someone else working out a problem at a table under the growing light of a lamp, or the moment when the disease has finally proceeded to its foregone working through, leaving behind it nothing but the question of whether there's a heaven to sing about. The clarity and poise of the arrangement, the confidence in the very writing of it, fosters the erroneous impression that there's all the truth there is in the little nexus, encapsulated here in narratives diminutive in form, perfectly told, as far as they are willing to be told. According to the dictionary, resolve derives from solve, and solve derives from the Latin solvere, that means untie, and re is an intensifier, meaning again. And so, again, again, and again, what's tied must be untied again and again and again. Or else it's like what happens inside a lock, the cylinders moving back and forth as the lock is locked, unlocked, and locked over and over. I've done I'm not going to read from it today because it take too much time, I think, but I've also done not a translation but a rendering of the Gilgamesh epic, and the great man who stood over me and got me into this business, named William Moran, who was the Assyriologist honcho at Harvard at the time, was a great friend, and he died in the year 2000. This poem is in 3 little parts, and it's called Brunswick, Maine, Early Winter 2000. I read it in this place in the reading because it's about reading too. And that day when Susie drove us out to get the lobsters at the lobster place at the cove, Bill Moran in the passenger seat of the car doubled up as if in a fit of laughter, paroxysm of helpless, silent laughter at the joke the Parkinsons had played on him, the big joke he simply couldn't get over. Bill Moran at breakfast time in the kitchen, bent double in his wheelchair, his chin almost touching the kitchen table and his eyes intently studying a piece of toast, a just discovered, as yet unreadable Mesopotamian language, not related to Akkadian or Sumerian, much older even than what he knew about already. The great old man, with his ferocity of tenderness and joy, his eyes intently studying the text. He sent me once a passage copied from Nietzsche's book, Daybreak. It is a connoisseurship of the word. Philology is that venerable art that asks one thing above all other things: read slowly, slowly. It is a goldsmith's art, looking before and after, cautiously, considering, reconsidering, studying with delicate eyes and fingers. It does not easily get anything done. Bill looking for heaven on the tabletop. After the funeral, Susie said, Bill thought he'd be flying around up there somewhere forever. And he could fly. After breakfast that day, we wheeled him away from the kitchen table and into the living room, and there was a frame contraption set up on long, thin, crane-like legs. It looked like something in a children's playground, with a canvas sling to carry him through the air from the wheelchair to another chair. Heartbreaking, swaddled, small, ridiculously like a newborn baby. Or else the sling resembled those slings you see on television when they rescue people from their sinking boats and carry them up under the angel wings to safety in the helicopter noise. I'd like to read another poem about poetry, which is the 8th ode of Book 4 of Horace, the Ode to Censorinus, a much admired friend, rich friend. If I had plenty of money, Censorinus, I could give other kinds of presents to my friends, bowls and bronzes, tripods, antique Greek treasures, things painted by Parrhasius, or things that Scopas sculpted, skillfully representing gods or heroes. And you would by no means have the least of these. But I don't have the power to give any such gifts, nor do you need such trifles. It is poetry you love. It is poetry I can give, and I know its worth. Marble can tell the story of what the dead hero did, bringing him back to life engraved in stone, or how Hannibal fled, his threats on his own head, and how Scipio, by his African conquest, came home with a new name. But stone cannot tell as well as poetry can the tale. Nor would you have the praise you merit if your story went unwritten. Who would Romulus be, the son of Ilia and the son of Mars, had silence, envious of his deeds, held back the telling? And who was it who rescued Aeacus from the Stygian waters of oblivion and brought him safe ashore on the blessed isle? It was poetry rescued him. Poetry forbids that he who deserves our praise will be forgotten. The blessing of the muse is on the hero's head. Thus Hercules, an honored guest, is welcome at Jupiter's banquet table, and the shining stars, the brothers, Castor and Pollux, quiet the waters, and the storm-stricken vessel makes it home to port. And over the woodland festival, Bacchus presides, wearing his crown of ivy, all promises having been kept. And another ode, the 14th ode of the second book, very famous, to Posthumus. How the years go by. Alas, how the years go by. Behaving well can do nothing at all about it. Wrinkles will come, old age will come, and death indomitable. Nothing at all will work. Offer and pledge 300 oxen a day, unweeping Pluto will never be appeased. Giants he holds in thrall down there forever, on the other bank of that dark stream that all who eat and drink the good things of the earth must cross at last, whoever they may be, rich man or poor man, whatever. It doesn't matter. In vain that you fear what's born on the sick south wind. In vain that you survived the bloody field. In vain that you made for port, having ridden out the terrible storm that time on the Adriatic. It doesn't matter at all. However it happens, each one of us, however it happens, each one of us shall come to see the black river Cocytus wandering through the region where Danaus' wicked daughters endlessly suffer and Sisyphus forever labors on. Each one of us must leave the earth he loves and leave his home and leave his tender wife and leave the trees he planted and took good care of. Only the cypress grows along those banks. Your heir will drink the choice Caecuban wine you did not know that you were saving for him when you locked it up securely in your cellar. The wine he spills is priceless. It doesn't matter. And the short ode, which I did in 14 lines because it's in fact one of the sources for a number of Shakespeare's sonnets. It's to a very pretty boy named Ligorinus. Still cruel and still endowed with power to be so, gifted as you are with the gifts of Venus, that moment is coming when suddenly in the glass you see beginning the little signs of change, downy foreshadowing of the beard to come, the locks that curl and wanton to the shoulders, all of a sudden looking a little different. The cream and rose complexion beyond the beauty of freshest roses, now not quite exactly the way it had been just yesterday morning. Then you will say, alas, for what I was when I was younger than I am. Alas, that then I did not know what I know now. Alas, that now I know what I did not know. And then I'd like to read another poem that has a little bit of Shakespeare in it, called Street Scene. Someone's shadow and the shadow of his dog, or what I see through my window looking out across the street. Someone's shadow, and then as the leaves of the tree just outside my window move a little this way or that with the breeze, it's Mr. Wren taking his dog for a walk, or being out there with his dog in order maybe to be seen as one of us. The two of them standing there, vacant of conversation. His tan shirt, brown pants, bald spot, his trivial pug, absurdly the color of a golden retriever. That this huge stage presenteth naught but shows. The red truck that was parked in the parking lot they have walked past without seeming to notice it is now leaving the parking lot. It is as if the man and his dog, both of them, knew that the truck was going to move because all three of them have become in common elements of the scene that I'm observing, and so all three of them seem to understand that they have a common purpose. The side of the red truck just a moment ago had, painted on it in white graphics, charrette. That word was on it when it left my view. Now, a blue truck with no letters on its side, so giving no information about its purpose, turns into the parking lot and then backs into the same slot under the overhang of the building. A shifting of the leaves of the tree that I'm looking through prevents me from seeing who gets out of the truck and where it is he goes. It is as if the brilliant red truck with the white letters on it had changed its color outside my range of sight, whereon by day the stars in secret comment. And therefore it is as if I had imagined the change of color, the vanishing of the one truck, the sudden appearance of the other one. Magic, a trick of magic, performed by me, something that I performed because I saw it, or the trick was performed by the unseen hand of the world. Charette went out of business in that instant. And what became of Mr. Wren and his dog? Hurled down to the underworld, twisting and turning, the two of them falling, the dog's leash fluttering in the eerie light down there through which they fell. Here are two passages from Virgil's Aeneid, both of them from Book 2. It's right after Sinon pretending to be in flight from the Greeks and betraying their secrets to the Trojans, his lying successfully to the Trojans so that they'll bring the Trojan horse within their walls, precipitating the fall of Troy. But then there is an event more frightful still that comes upon us unprovided, unforeseeing souls. Laocoon, chosen by Lot to be the priest of Neptune, was in the act of performing the sacrifice of a great bull at the altar, when lo, I shudder to speak it, over the tranquil, quiet sea that lies between the island of Tenedos and the mainland, there comes a pair of giant serpents swimming towards us, their immense coils writhing as side by side they make their steady way through the waters and head for shore, their breasts held high, impelling the waves before them, their blood-red crests held high, the rest of their bodies following along on the surface of the water, their great sinuous backs coiling behind them. We can hear, as they come, the sound of the foaming water their bodies displace. We see how with bloodshed, fiery eyes they gaze at the shore they are approaching, licking their hissing mouths with their quivering tongues. The blood drains from our faces at the sight as we shrink back. Their whole immensity moves without swerving towards Laocoon. Then first, each one of the two enwraps the little body of one of his two sons in its enfolding embrace and pastures upon its limbs. And then, as Laocoon is rushing, armed, to try to come to the aid of his dying children, they seize him and bind him in their giant coils, twice coiling around his waist, then twice again their scaly coils coiling around his throat, their heads and necks held high, victorious. He struggles with his hands to get himself free from the knots they wind around him. His priestly fillets are drenched in his bloody gore and their black venom. The clamor of his horrifying cries rises to the stars like the loud bellowing of a bull half killed who has broken away from the altar and from the misjudged blow of the ritual axe aimed at its neck. And then the pair of dragons slither away and seek the shrine of fierce Tritonia and shelter there beneath the feet of the goddess and her circled shield. Then when the people see this, there is a strange terror that shudders through all their hearts, and they turn to each other and say that Laocoon deserved what the serpents had done to him because of what he had done when he hurled his infamous spear into the body of the sacred oak and so profaned it. This is the general cry. We must take the effigy to the goddess's shrine and supplicate her divinity for forgiveness. And so we open up the city walls and expose the battlements, all working together to make this happen, fastening gliding wheels to its giant feet and ropes around its neck as halters with which to draw it to the shrine. The fatal machine, pregnant with arms, begins to climb our walls. Around it there are boys and unwedded girls joyfully singing hymns and joyfully touching the ropes by means of which the horse begins to move. It climbs up through the opening walls, and this once done, it rolls menacing into the central city. Oh, my country, oh, my Ilium, home of the gods, oh, all protecting glorious battlements of Troy. This is Aeneid talking, of course. 4 times as it is moved, it halts at the city gates, and 4 times then there is within the horse the sound of armor clashing. Yet, blind with fury and not knowing what it is that we are doing, we keep going until we have enshrined the monstrous thing in the citadel itself. Cassandra is there, and even then cries out in prophecy of the doom that was right now coming on upon us. But by a god's command, her voice was never to be believed by Trojan ears. And we, unhappy people, on this our final day, festoon the town with celebratory garlands. And now the heavens move, and night comes in, covers with its darkness, earth and sky, and the tricks of the Myrmidons. Throughout the city, the Trojans, wearied by joy, lie fast asleep. And now the Greeks set out from Tenedos, their ships in ordered formation, under the silent light of the friendly moon, making their way quietly towards the shore they know so well. And when the lead ship's beacon light is shown, Sinon, protected by the complicit fates, furtively opens up its wooden sides and frees the Achaeans from the horse's womb. The horse releases them to the open air, and joyfully they come out. First come the captains, Thasander and Sthenelus and dire Ulysses, lowering themselves to the ground by means of a rope, and Acamas, Thoas and Neoptolemus of the house of Peleus, and Machaon the prince, and Menelaus and Epeius, he who built the wooden horse. They enter the city that slumbers, submerged in wine and sleep. They surprise and kill the watchmen and open up the gates to welcome in their comrades from the fleet, letting them in for what they are going to do. And then the other passage is about the death of Priam. And if you wish to hear what the fate of Priam is, to hear what was the fate of Priam, I must tell you. When he sees how the city has fallen and how the doors of his palace are smashed and broken into, how the Greeks are in the innermost chambers of his home, the aged king takes up the royal armor so long unused by him and puts it on his trembling old man's shoulders and girds himself with his useless sword, sends himself to death, helpless old man, against the crowding foe. In the atrium in the middle of his palace, there was open to the vault of the heavens above, there was a great altar, and leaning over it an ancient laurel tree that with its shade embraced protectively the household gods. Here's Hecuba, and with her are her daughters, huddled together like doves, sheltering in vain from the black winds of the storm that drove them there, and clutching in their hands the sacred icons. But when she sees her husband, Priam, wearing the armor he had worn when he was young, Hecuba cries out to him, "My husband, my poor husband, what are you thinking of, that you have put on this armor and carry these weapons? Even if Hector were here, this is no longer a time for such as these. Come here with me. Take shelter at this altar. It will protect us. If not, this is the place where we will all of us together die together." These were her words as she drew him close to her and helped him to a seat before the throne. But suddenly, there's one of Priam's sons, Polites, fleeing through a hail of arrows from Pyrrhus' slaughter, running through the halls and empty courtyards of the palace to the atrium where Priam was, and Pyrrhus hot on his heels and hot to butcher him, and going to do so now. And Polites falls, and his life pours out of him in streams of blood before the eyes of his father and his mother. And though already in the hands of death, Priam cries out in rage in his old man voice, "If anywhere there's righteousness in heaven, may the deities pay you back for what you do. Your obscene crime, polluting a father's face with what it has to see, his own son slaughter. Achilles, whose son you pretend to be, did not behave like this. He paid the due respect to a father's supplication and sent back home the body of Hector to its tomb and sent me home unarmed." And saying this, he weakly hurls his spear at Pyrrhus, and the spear rebounds from the ringing brass of Pyrrhus' shield and, bobbing purposeless, hangs from the top of the boss. And Pyrrhus says, "Then go down there below and take this news about me to my father, and be sure to tell him all about his son, degenerate Pyrrhus, and his despicable deeds." And having said these words, he drags old Priam, trembling and shaking and slipping in the blood that was pouring out of the body of his son, to the high altar, and there he clutches him by the hair with his left hand, and with his right hand raises his glittering sword and plunges it in, up to the hilt, into his side. This is the way the fortunes of Priam came to the end that was fated for him, fated to see the fires consuming his Troy and Pergamum fall down. He who had been the monarch of Asia, the ruler of so many lands and of so many tribes, a huge, headless body upon the shore, a nameless trunk. Excuse me. I'd like to read one more passage from the Latin, from the Fourth Georgic. Virgil's account of Orpheus and Eurydice. Eurydice has died fleeing from one who would rape her by a snake. And the story follows from there. "She fled from you," the rapist is being addressed, "headlong along the river, unhappy maiden, and did not see the frightful snake that lurked in the high grass guarding the riverbank. The cries of the sister bands of dryads filled the air as high as the mountain tops. The cliffs of Rhodope wept, the cliffs of Pangaea wept, and the warrior land of the Getae, Oreithia, Hebrus. Alone upon the unfrequented shore, Orpheus, playing his lyre, sang to himself his songs of you, dear wife, as day came on, with the light of the morning sun. And as the light descended in the evening, singing he went down through the very throat of Tenerus, the high gate of the dark kingdom of Dis, and through the murky grove where terror dwells in black obscurity, and entered into the Manes place, the place of the dreadful king, and the hearts no human prayers can cause to pity. And set in motion by the sound of his music, from the lowest depths of Erebus there came, as numerous as the many hundred birds that, driven there by the coming on of evening or by a winter storm, fly in for shelter in the foliage of a grove, the flittering shades, the unsubstantial phantom shapes of those for whom there is not any sight at all, women and men, famous, great-hearted heroes, the life in their hero bodies now defunct, unmarried boys and girls, sons whom their fathers had had to watch being placed on the funeral pyre, and all around them the hideous, tangling weeds and the black ooze of Cositos' swampy waters. 9 times Styx wound its fettering chain around them, and the house of death was spellbound by his music, all the way down to the bottom of Tartarus. Spellbound, the snakes in the hair of the Furies too, and Cerberus, the hell dogs, all 3 mouths were open-mouthed and silent, forgetting to bark. The wind was still, and Ixion's wheel stopped turning. And now, as he was carefully going back the way he came, and step by step avoiding all possible wrong steps, and step by step Eurydice, whom he was bringing back unseen behind his back, was following, for this is what Proserpina had commanded. They were coming very near the upper air, and a sudden madness seized him, madness of love, a madness to be forgiven if hell but knew how to forgive. He stopped in his tracks, and then, just as they were just about to emerge out into the light, suddenly, seized by love, bewildered into heedlessness, alas, his purpose overcome, he turned and looked back at Eurydice, and then and there his labor was spilled and flowed away like water. The implacable tyrant broke the pact. 3 times the pool of Avernus heard the sound of thunder. What was it, she cried? What madness, Orpheus, was it that has destroyed us, you and me? Oh, look, the cruel fates already call me back, and sleep is covering over my swimming eyes. Farewell, I'm being carried off into the vast surrounding dark and reaching out my strengthless hands to you, forevermore, alas, not yours. And saying this, like smoke disintegrating into air, she was dispersed away and vanished from his eyes, and never saw him again, and he was left clutching at shadows with so much still to say. And the boatman never again would take him across the barrier of the marshy waters of hell. What could he do? His wife twice taken from him. How could he bear it? How could his tears move hell? The Stygian boat has carried her away. I'd like to read a short poem of mine, 2 or 3 poems that have to do with the Orpheus and Eurydice. This is called Graveyard. It's about a snapshot of my father. A writing I can't read myself. Picture of my father, taken a couple of years before he died. He's sitting alone someplace, I don't know. Maybe one of the meetings he took to going to, trying to keep his place in the world. He's smiling a little, cigarette smoke drifting away. He looks courteous, as always. Not easy to know. The side of a hill. Nothing but a place. Grass, dirt, a few scattered sticks, some stones, the shadow of a tree. Eurydice, my father, speaking the words as they are spoken, the meaning closes itself up. A manuscript written in a language only the dead speak. And this poem is called resemblance. Sorry. It was my father in that restaurant on Central Avenue in Orange, New Jersey, where I stopped for lunch and a drink after coming away from visiting after many years had passed, the place to which I'd brought my father's ashes and the ashes of my mother, where my father's grandparents, parents, brothers had been buried, and others of the family, all together. The atmosphere was smoky, and there was a vague, struggling transaction going on between the bright daylight of the busy street outside and the somewhat dirty light of the unwashed ceiling globes of the restaurant I was in. He was having lunch. I couldn't see what he was having, but he seemed to be eating, maybe without noticing whatever it was he may have been eating. He seemed to be listening to a conversation with 2 or 3 others. Shades of the dead come back from where they went to when they went away? Or maybe those others weren't speaking at all. Maybe it was a dumb show put on for my benefit. It was the eerie persistence of his not seeming to recognize that I was there, watching him from my table across the room. It was also the sense of his being included in the conversation around him, and yet not. Though this in life had been familiar to me, no great change from what had been there before. Even in my sense that I, across the room, was excluded, which went along with my sense of him when he was alive, that often he didn't feel included in the scenes and talk around him, and his isolation itself excluded others. Where were we in that restaurant that day? Had I gone down into the world of the dead? Were those other people really shades of the dead? We expect that if they came back, they would come back to impart some knowledge of what it was they had learned. Or if this was indeed down there, then they, down there, would reveal to us who visit them in a purified language some truth that in our condition of being alive, we are unable to know. Their tongues are ashes when they'd speak to us. Unable to know is a condition I've lived in all my life. A poverty of imagination about the life of another human being. This is, I think, the case with everyone. Is it because there is a silence that we are all of us forbidden to cross? Not only the silence that divides the dead from the living, but antecedent to that, is it the silence there is between the living and the living? Unable to reach across that silence through the baffling light there always is between us? Among the living, the body can do so sometime, but the mind, constricted, inhibited by its ancestral knowledge of final separation, holds back, unable to complete what it wanted to say. What is your name that I can call you by? Virgil said, when Eurydice died again, there was still so much to say that had not been said even before her first death, from which he had vainly attempted with his singing to rescue her. I'd like to read a poem called Poem. A free verse poem. Poem. The mind's whispering to itself is its necessity to be itself and not to be any other, if only for the moment as it passes. It eats what it needs from the world around itself. Slowly it makes its way, floating through temperatures, degrees and other degrees of light and dark. It moves through all things by virtue of its own characteristics. Mainly, it is silent. But when it utters a sound, it is a sound which others find hard to interpret, and which it knows, and which is known, so it supposes, only to another creature it dreams of, so similar to itself as not to have entirely opposite identity. Somewhere there may be such a creature. Emerson said, they may be real, perhaps they are. Yet it also thinks it is the only one and is lonely. It can be silent and unknown, except to itself, or not even known to itself for long periods of time that are like hibernation or sleepless reverie. It is never asleep during the long nights of sleep. And this is a poem called The Intention of Things. The death that lives in the intentions of things, to have a meaning of some sort or other, that means to come to something in the end. It is the death that lives not finding the meaning of this or that object as it moves among them uncertainly, moving among the shadows, the things that are like shadows, shadows of things, the things, the shadows of shadows, all in the effort to put off the death that we are coming to. Somebody's cock or cunt, or the leaves of a tree on a summer night in a landscape somewhere else, under which something happened that made it different. It is seeking to find the meaning of what they are, but it moves uncertainly among them, the shadows, the things that are like shadows, putting off the death that is coming, that we are coming to. It is the death that lives, that makes the flower be what it's going to be, and makes it die, and makes the musical phrase complete itself, or fail to complete itself, as Goethe said, writing a friend whose son had died in the army. So you have had another terrible trial. It's still, alas, the same old story. To live long is to outlive many. And after all, we don't even know then what it was all about. The answer to part of the riddle is we each have something peculiarly our own that we mean to develop by letting it take its course. This strange thing cheats us from day to day, and so we grow old without knowing how it happened or why. It is the death that lives in the intention of things to have a meaning of some sort or other. Implacable, bewildered, it moves among us, seeking its own completion, still seeking to do so, but also putting it off, the death that is coming, that we are coming to. I'm going to read two more brief poems, and one of them to change the tone of this. And a poem written about a very different kind of weather than we're experiencing. It's called Down by the River. And the river is the Charles River. The page is green, like water. Words are drifting across the notebook page on a day in June of irresistible good weather. Everything's easy. This side of the river, on a bench near the water, a young man is peaceably stroking the arm of a girl. He is dreaming of eating a peach. Somebody's rowing. Somebody's running over the bridge that goes over the highway beyond the river. The river is blue. The river is moving along, taking it easy. A breeze has come up, and somewhere a dog is barking, acknowledging the stirring of the breeze. Nobody knows whose dog. The river is moving. The boats are moving with it, or else against it. People beside the river are watching the boats. Along the pathway on this side of the river, somebody's running, looking good in the sunshine. Everything going along with everything else, moving along in participial rhythm, flowing, enjoying, taking its own sweet time. On the other side of the river, somebody else, a man or a woman, is painting the scene I'm part of. A brilliantly clear, diminutive figure works at a tiny easel, and as a result, my soul lives on forever in somebody's heavenly picture. And I'd like to conclude with the very last passage from Horace's Art of Poetry, the Book 2, Epistle 3. Sensible people run from the crazy poet, as afraid to touch him as if he had the itch, or the king's disease, or Diana's lunatic frenzy. The little children follow him around, jeering and taunting. He wanders around the landscape, babbling verses, staring up at the sky, and if, like a birder intent on sighting a bird, he happens to fall down into a well or a pit, he calls out, "Citizens, help!" and nobody comes. Or else if somebody comes to pull him out, what if he doesn't want to be helped, I say? What if he fell in the well of his own free will? What if he did it on purpose? And then I tell them about the Sicilian poet Empedocles, who, cool as can be, hopped into the hot volcano. Such poets have the right to kill themselves, to do themselves in. To save one may be to him like killing him off. This poet isn't the first one to fall down a well, and if you pull him out, there's no guarantee he's therefore going to be a sensible person and give up his wish to die a famous death. What made him become a poet anyway? Maybe he pissed on the ashes of his father, or did something else unholy, someplace holy. Whatever it was, he's crazy, and like a bear who's broken out of his cage, he puts to flight everybody he meets by his horrible reading. If he catches a man, he'll read that man to death. He's a leech that won't let go till he's full of blood. Thank you.